The Seine flowed quietly through the heart of Paris, its waters reflecting spires, timbered roofs, and the ever-watchful walls that had guarded the city for generations. For centuries, the Franks had called this city home, its streets bustling with merchants, artisans, and noble families. But on this morning, a shadow stretched across the land. Not clouds, not fog, but the distant, steady rhythm of oars striking the river, the glint of iron, the unmistakable advance of Viking longships. From the north, a fleet of nearly 120 ships carved through the mist, carrying warriors whose names would strike fear across Europe. Ragnar, the legendary Viking chieftain, had led his men from the frigid fjords of Scandinavia, through icy rivers and forests, driven by ambition, plunder, and a vision of glory. They were swift, disciplined, and ruthless, a force unlike any Paris had faced before. For the citizens and defenders of Paris, the alarm spread slowly at first, almost disbelievingly. Could such a small barbaric army truly threaten a city of walls and towers? But as scouts reported the sheer number of ships and men, panic began to stir. It was not just the Vikings' numbers that worried them, but their audacity, their speed, and the stories that had preceded them. Towns burned, monasteries pillaged, kings humbled. And yet within the walls, the Frankish leadership steeled themselves. King Charles the Bald, the ruler of West Francia, knew that the survival of Paris depended on strategy, courage, and the city's ancient defenses. The Seine could be both shield and trap. The walls could protect or confine, and the citizens could either crumble in fear or rise in desperate unity. This is the story of that siege, a clash of civilizations, of cunning against courage, of longships against walls, and of a city that refused to surrender even when the horizon seemed filled with doom. In 845, the kingdom of West Francia was a patchwork of territories, each controlled by counts and dukes, each bound loosely to the authority of the king. Charles the Bald, grandson of Charlemagne, ruled a realm stretched thin across rivers, forests, and plains. Power was fragmented, communication slow, and armies small and often poorly coordinated. Paris, though the spiritual and economic heart of the kingdom, was not a fortress in the modern sense. Its walls, built decades earlier, were strong but incomplete, and the population, while resilient, lacked the military experience to repel a professional raiding force like Ragnar's Vikings. The city had been threatened before, but never by an enemy who combined strategy, speed, and sheer audacity. For the King Charles the Bald, Paris was more than a city. It was a symbol. Losing it would not just be a tactical blow, but a collapse of morale, prestige, and legitimacy. He had to hold it at all costs, yet he understood the limitations. The king could not be everywhere at once. His forces were small, and the Vikings' unpredictability made traditional defense almost irrelevant. And so Paris braced itself. Guards doubled their patrols along the walls, citizens reinforced barricades, and the riverbanks became watchtowers, looking for the first sign of Ragnar's arrival. Every man, woman, and child knew that when the longships appeared, the city would be tested in a way few could survive. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo through history, the audacious siege of Paris, where cunning, bravery, and desperation would collide against the fury of the Vikings.
Before Paris would tremble beneath the sound of oars and shields, Ragnar had already carved a reputation across Europe. From the fjords of Scandinavia, he emerged not just as a raider, but as a strategist, a visionary who understood the value of speed, surprise, and terror. Villages along the coasts of Francia and the Frankish rivers had learned the same lesson repeatedly. Viking longships could appear where least expected, strike swiftly, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. Ragnar's fame was not only built on violence, but on cunning. Unlike many raiders, he sought intelligence. Scouts mapped rivers, forests, and towns. Alliances were forged, whether through intimidation or diplomacy, ensuring that few could stand against him alone. His men were loyal to a fault, united by shared ambition, blood oath, and the lure of wealth and glory. Every raid honed their discipline. Every battle sharpened their instincts. By 845, Ragnar commanded a fleet of nearly 120 longships, carrying thousands of warriors armed with axes, spears, and shields. They were disciplined, coordinated, and accustomed to striking where the enemy least expected. Their reputation preceded them. Monasteries burned, towns looted, and kings humbled. Even the Frankish court, seasoned in politics and war, could not dismiss the threat as rumor or legend. Ragnar's approach was both psychological and military. He understood fear as a weapon. The sight of longships appearing over the horizon, the echo of oars striking the river, and the thunderous charge of warriors on foot could shatter morale before a sword was even raised. By the time he arrived at Paris, the city was already under siege in spirit, its citizens bracing for a force they feared might be unstoppable. Paris in 845 was both formidable and fragile. Its walls stretched along the Seine, towers rising as vigilant sentinels, but centuries of growth and neglect had left gaps and weaknesses. Inside, timbered homes crowded narrow streets, marketplaces teeming with trade, and citizens untrained for war. The city's defenses relied on a few thousand soldiers, a handful of professional men-at-arms, and the unwavering resolve of its leaders. King Charles the Bald understood the stakes. Paris was more than a city. It was the symbol of West Francia's legitimacy. Losing it would mean not just a strategic defeat, but a collapse of authority. The king ordered repairs to the walls, stockpiled weapons and food, and called upon citizens to assist in fortifying bridges and gates. Yet even with preparation, the imbalance was clear. The Vikings' numbers and mobility far exceeded anything Paris could muster. Morale teetered between fear and defiance. Families hid valuables and prayed for divine intervention. Soldiers drilled tirelessly, knowing that every arrow, every bolt, every swing of the sword could determine the city's survival. Scouts kept watch along the Seine, reporting the first glimmers of longships slicing through the morning mist. Paris was alive with tension. From the highest towers, watchers squinted at the horizon, imagining the approach of the enemy. The river, normally a lifeline for commerce, had become a potential avenue for destruction. Every citizen and soldier felt it. The city was perched on the edge of history, ready to either fall into ruin or rise in improbable triumph. On a gray morning in late 845, the first Viking longships appeared on the Seine. Their wooden hulls carved through the water with unerring precision, oars slicing rhythmically, shields lining the decks like an advancing forest of iron. Ragnar had chosen his point of entry carefully, exploiting the river's curves to conceal his numbers until the moment of attack. Paris's defenders reacted swiftly. Archers lined the walls, catapults readied, and gates reinforced. Civilians worked tirelessly, moving stones, pouring boiling pitch, and preparing traps along the riverbanks. The city understood the magnitude of the threat. Ragnar would not merely plunder, he sought to bend Paris to his will, to demonstrate that no fortress could resist Viking ingenuity. The siege began with probing attacks. Viking warriors rode close, testing the defenses, sending small groups ashore to gauge the city's response. Towers rained arrows, boiling oil and spears, slowing the enemy's advance. Yet, for every setback, Ragnar adapted. He redirected ships, repositioned men, and exploited every weakness in Paris's fortifications. His men were not just raiders, but engineers of terror, finding ways to scale walls, break gates, and use the river as both shield and path of attack. From the walls, defenders watched in awe and terror. Paris had faced invaders before, but never such a relentless combination of speed, discipline, and adaptability. Each day of the siege brought new tension as the city clung to its defenses while Ragnar's men probed, tested, and pressured at every angle.
The climax came when Ragnar attempted a full assault on the city's river-facing defenses. His longships surged forward, their prows rammed against palisades, warriors leaping ashore, axes raised, shields interlocked. Paris's defenders responded with everything they had. Boiling oil poured from walls, flaming arrows darkened the sky, and stones crashed down from towers. The battle was chaotic, yet meticulously executed on both sides. Ragnar's men fought with ferocity, attempting to overwhelm the defenses before reinforcements from the interior could arrive. Paris's soldiers and militia, though outnumbered, used every advantage of terrain and fortification to slow the assault. Narrow streets, barricaded bridges, and strategically collapsed buildings funneled the Vikings into choke points, allowing smaller groups to repel much larger forces. The river became a battlefield itself. Parisian defenders used the flow of the Seine to their advantage, sinking boats, diverting currents, and cutting off Viking ships. Fighting on the water was brutal. Warriors swung from ropes, shields clashed, and the river ran red with the wounded. Ragnar's leadership was visible everywhere, rallying his men, reorganizing broken lines, and striking with precision. Yet despite their coordination, the defenders' knowledge of their city and clever tactics blunted the Viking advance. Hours passed in a haze of smoke, steel, and chaos. By evening, Ragnar realized the siege was unlikely to succeed without reinforcements or alternative strategies. The Vikings had caused terror and destruction, but had failed to breach the core of Paris. Exhausted and with losses mounting, Ragnar ordered a tactical withdrawal, his fleet retreating down the Seine, leaving the city battered but unbroken. The turning point was both practical and psychological. The defenders' ingenuity, using the river, walls, and urban terrain, had turned what seemed inevitable into a stalemate. Paris had survived because leadership, strategy, and the courage of citizens matched the Vikings' aggression. Ragnar, recognizing that continued assaults could cost him his army, withdrew strategically, preserving his forces for future campaigns, while Paris's defenders celebrated survival. The siege of Paris in 845 left scars but also lessons. Ragnar's reputation as a formidable Viking leader grew, yet Paris had endured. The city reinforced its defenses, repaired walls, and strengthened militias. Charles the Bald learned the importance of coordinated regional defense, better communication, and the necessity of river patrols against longships. For Europe, the siege became legendary. It illustrated the terrifying reach of Viking power, but also the potential of strategic defense against overwhelming odds. The tales of Ragnar's bold attempt to seize Paris spread across the continent, immortalizing both fear and admiration in equal measure. Paris survived. The Seine flowed as before, and the city's legend grew, a symbol of resilience against the most feared warriors of the age. Ragnar returned north, but his attempt left an indelible mark, not as a conquest, but as a story of ambition, audacity, and the limits of even the greatest Viking forces when met with courage, ingenuity, and determination. If you loved this cinematic dive into Viking history, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more epic tales of war, strategy, and legendary battles. Tell us in the comments, which historic siege or Viking raid should we uncover next? Your choice could be our next cinematic journey.